What?
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where this broadcast finds you today. I'm going to let everybody get settled in here before we virtually settled in, I guess you could say, before we get started. Yes, it's really good to see some familiar names and a few faces as well. That's great. So glad you could all join us. We have a special guest speaker today, and we'll get started here. I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Steve Steiny. I'd like to welcome you all to the Native Veterans Resilience and Wellness Skills. Today we have a guest speaker sharing his story. Today's title for today's broadcast is Desperation, Trauma, and Success, a Personal Story. A couple of slides I'll go through, and then we will turn the floor over to Mr. Ray Daw. And, or Ray, were we having David or you start us off today? Who did we decide on? Was it you, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll turn the floor over to David Natseway here in just a moment. But again, I want to welcome everyone. My name is Steve Steiny. I am with the National American Indian Alaska Native, ATTC. I'm broadcasting to you live from the University of Iowa campus here in Iowa City, Iowa. Happy to have you all. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian Alaskan Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. We are part of the ATTC network, which also includes 10 regional centers, a network of coordinating offices, and the National Hispanic and Latino ATTC. This project is supported by SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA Health and Human Services or the American Indian Alaska Native ATTC or MHTTC. I also wanted to mention that before we get started today, we want to acknowledge the current political climate. We know that it is stressful for many, and we may have those on the call today with differing opinions. We want to remind everyone that, as always, we want to be respectful of one another. Immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GIPRA evaluation. We will also post a direct link to our GIPRA survey in the chat box during today's broadcast. Please take a few moments to fill this out. We value your feedback and really want to hear from you. This also will help us continue to provide services such as this to our constituents. So we really would appreciate you taking just a few minutes. It's a short survey. Please fill this out and get it back to us. If you're not able to do that during the broadcast, you will receive an email and have another opportunity to do so. As most of you know by now, you will be muted during for the duration of this webinar. Please, however, use the chat feature to share your questions and comments. I talked to Roy as we were getting ready to come on, and he may pick out some comments as well and address those as he's sharing, or we may save some time at the end as well to address any comments or concerns. But feel free to unmute yourself during the broadcast today if you have a question or a thought or a comment that you would like to have Roy or one of our other facilitators address. So I want to introduce today's guest speaker. We have today with us Mr. Roy Pack. I have known Roy for, I think I first met Roy sometime last year during our Leadership Academy meeting down in New Mexico. Roy is a Wyoming native. He is from Buffalo, Wyoming, was raised with traditional values in the Bighorn Mountains of Buffalo, Wyoming. He has a BS in psychology from Montana State University in Billings, and also has some graduate studies through the University of the Rockies. Roy has spent nearly a lifetime in the behavioral health field, having been the founder of a community mental health center and helping others start or build their mental health centers in Indian country. Roy has spent the past as both an employee and a subcontractor for the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council in Billings, Montana. And during his tenure there, he assisted tribes to enhance their delivery of services, advocate contracts with the state, and served as the program director with the Tribal Opioid Response Grant for Yellowstone County, Montana. 2019, Mr. Pack began his work with Leadership Academy as a mentor for the Four Directions Recovery in Fort Hall, Idaho. Roy continues his mentorship and private consulting for guest appearances, program development, and technical assistance to the tribal programs that request his assistance. He truly believes that we receive the most in life by giving to others, sharing our experiences, hopes, and dreams. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce our speaker today and my friend, Mr. Roy Pack. And I think before Roy gets started, I believe David was going to offer a blessing.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Watsi, Shania, Naya, Sehopa. Creator, thank you for giving us this time together to listen to these words and the knowledge that's going to be passed on. Teach us love and compassion and to honor one another. Remind us always to always respect our Mother Earth, who nourishes us, provides what we use to care for ourselves and our families and our people. And Creator, help us to understand the purpose of the current times and to accept that your mysteries have a purpose. Dua-e, hashjame, gome. Thank you.
Thank you, David. On the line too, I do want to acknowledge Natasha Peterson will be here to assist us with chat box comments and other technical issues. So if you are having technical issues, reach out to Natasha via chat. We do have on the line Mr. Ray Daw, a senior consultant with our center, as well as David Natseway, a consultant with our center. Both are also members of our advisory council. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Roy. And thank you, Roy, for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I want to thank Ray Daw and Steve and Natasha for setting this up. And I see some familiar faces out there. It's good to see you guys again. I always point out Jim over there. I see his face quite a bit. I love seeing him on these meetings. Great minds think alike, and we tend to hit on the same topics in the same way a lot. So that's pretty cool. Boy, this is probably going to be one of the toughest things I've done as far as presentation. I mean, ask that the grandfathers guide me in this and that I can speak in a good way and be heard in a good way. And I want to say thank you to everybody for allowing me this opportunity to speak before you, many of my elders out there, many of my peers out there. So thank you so much for that. Washte, much appreciated. When Ray reached out and asked me about this, it was just kind of a fluke. Not really a fluke. I was talking and he says, we need to have you talk to our veterans, group. And I'm like, okay. And right away, my gut just told me that this is one of those things where rather than speaking as a professional or anything like that, I just need to speak more from the heart of my experiences, my past and my story. And later on, if they have me back, we can get into more detailed clinical things or something like that. I'm not sure. I want to start out a little bit with my background. I'm going to move out of the way so you can see it there. You can see that that's my teepee up in the Bighorn Mountains, hunting camp a while back. And it's at a place called Pole Creek. And there are two places in the Bighorns primarily the lodge poles came from. One was Lodge Pole Ridge above Story, Wyoming. And I used to live there on Red Cloud Ridge, which is where Red Cloud literally set and planned the military actions against the Fetterman, for the Fetterman massacre in Fort Phil Kearny, the wagon box fights there. And the other one was up here on Pole Creek. And it's such a comforting photo for me, facing east, the morning sun coming in and that sun shining on the back and the smoke coming out. And whenever I look at this photo, it really creates some emotion for me at about a time and space that has transcended just that one day or that one morning. It started when I was very, very young. So I'm originally from Buffalo, Wyoming, and my grandfather was Arapaho and Lakota. And I grew up in the mornings, I sat with him. Nobody else was awake in the house. We'd listen to the radio and we'd talk and he'd tell me stories, and he'd tell me stories of the little people and tell me stories, of native ways and things like that. And I remember the day I asked him, I said, Grandpa, do we have Indian blood? And he says, yes, we're Indian, but we don't talk about that. And it wasn't until many decades later I found out why. And now it's kind of annoying in a way because it's a way to silently commit genocide on the people. In 1929, the courthouse burnt down in Johnson County, Wyoming, and all birth records burnt with it. And that included my grandparents' birth records and everybody's birth records in my family prior to that point. So we had no way to trace lineage back. But more importantly, it was just not a good place to be native. My grandfather, even though for what he did was respected in that area, you didn't talk about it. My great grandfather, his name is Andrew Brown, is actually in a few of the history books known as Arapaho Brown. In the Johnson County Cattle Wars, he fought on the side of the sheep herders that were Basque, created an armored car, rolled it into the TA ranch, held them, and he built this out of logs and wagon wheels to roll it on up, and a group of them rolled it in there, and they held the TA ranch hostage for 5 days until the cavalry showed up to end the siege and basically ended the Johnson County Cattle War. Before that, he fought a lot with the Arapaho, keeping the Bozeman Trail shut down as long as they could because they knew what would happen. One day in front of the Idlewild Motel there in Buffalo, right on Main Street, he was shot by a guy with a .32 pistol, and he always wore a buffalo robe, and that was thick enough that it stopped the slug, didn't hurt him. He promptly beat the guy up pretty bad, but he was shot because he had a native wife, and nobody realized he was native. His last name was Brown, but he was known as Arapaho Brown because that's who he stayed with all the time. And that's what kind of led to it's a little bitty small town with a lot of very systemic racism in there. Everybody hated natives. The community was split between Basque sheep herders and English cattlemen. The Basque won the Johnson County Cattle Wars. they had a lot in common with the natives. So my grandfather did get along with the Basque a lot. And that was kind of where and how I grew up. And even though we weren't on the reservation, he made sure to tell me the stories and the ways. And, you know, I can't think of how many times right there where that picture is that I was there with my grandfather, that we were there sitting quietly on top of the rocks next to a meadow waiting for the elk to come through. And, you know, talking to me in a good way about, you know, how to hunt, you know, how to give thanks. You know, the first one that comes out is the one you take, unless it's, you know, a cow or a doe with a fawn or a calf, then wait. And the Creator will give you what you're supposed to have that day. And these are the kinds of values I was raised with from very young age. So I grew up, for lack of a better term, poor white trash native in a white community right next to the reservation, lots of native friends. Got out of high school and immediately went to work in the oil field doing geophysical research, seismograph. Fun job, flew around in helicopters, drilled holes in the ground, set explosives, moved on. You know, every 440 feet, we drilled a hole and set explosives, and away we went. I played more with explosives and flew more in helicopters as a civilian than I ever did in the military. I mean, I logged thousands and thousands of hours doing that. It was a blast until 1983. 1983, and this is where desperation really kind of hit. It hit long before that, you know, and the opportunities I seen other kids have weren't there for me. But in 1983, it hit really solid. OPEC dropped the price of oil to $3 a barrel. At that point in time, we had 1,500 drilling rigs operating in Wyoming alone. The geophysical directory was bigger than a Denver phone book, and that was the directory for finding people that work in the oil field and provide services. It was about 4 inches thick. 1983, that hit, everything shut down, and we went from 1,500 drilling rigs in Wyoming to 150 active drilling rigs in the entire United States overnight. Buffalo, Wyoming went from over 5,000 population down to just below 3,000, down to 2,800 in a matter of a month. Everything imploded. If it was a state or an area that relied on oil production, it imploded. There's still to this day in Wyoming places where you can drive down the highway and there are drilling rigs that in the 80s cost close to $1 million that were stacked out and set alongside the road. And they put them there saying, one of these days we're going to come back and pick them up when everything starts. They're still there today. They were abandoned. And so our whole infrastructure broke. That's where the desperation really comes in. And I can really relate it to what I see on the reservations right now. Percentage wise, natives entered the military at a higher percentage than anybody else. You know, on the reservations, about 24%, depending on which reservation you're on, join the military. So it's way higher than any other ethnic group. And I relate that to understanding that sense of desperation and no jobs, no hope, no outlook for the future. I joined the military and joined the Army because I could not get a job anywhere. I had a wife and one small child at that point in time, and there just weren't any jobs at all. I had no skills other than the oil field. I mean, it's kind of hard to find a job setting explosives, or, you know, who's going to hire me for a job to fly around and survey out of helicopters? It just didn't exist. So I joined. I have really mixed feelings looking back on that at this point in time. The military never should have let me in all honesty. I mean, I scored high on the ASVABs. I maxed it out, got every single thing correct. Every placement they done, I maxed it out. I aced it. I got it all. But one thing that they didn't, I think, comprehend at that point in time was where I was at in my life. I just had a really strange situation happen where my wife had been raped and held hostage for 18 hours while I was out of town. I was still struggling with a lot of trauma from that, plus the trauma of loss of job, career, everything else, all that happening at once. And guess where I wound up? Military police. Now think about that for a minute. Someone with that kind of trauma within the last year going in and becoming a police officer. And then where did they put me? Well, they had me on a 2-year enlistment at that point in time. And so they really couldn't send me overseas. So they sent me to the most foreign country they could for a boy from Buffalo, Wyoming. I went to an open post called the Presidio in San Francisco. And my patrol area was from Fisherman's Wharf, Fort Mason, all the way to Sausalito Engineers Complex, Fort Berry, Fort Baker, and the Presidio. So we patrolled 4 military bases plus civilian area, all on an open post in downtown San Francisco alongside of the San Francisco Police Department. There's where problems really began. And I really learned how to become a very successful, high-functioning drug addict. And I'm going to chalk part of this up to a wonderful thing of cognitive dissonance. And I don't think there's a single person that's ever been in the military that does not experience cognitive dissonance. When you're told to do something, enforce something, or regulate something because it's the law and it's the rule, but you look at it and you go, ethically and morally, this is wrong. This is wrong. And being both military and a police officer, I looked at that. And you know, the things we're seeing in the news and media now is nothing new. I was pretty cocky back then, but we had a little guy from down south. I want to say he was from Georgia, and little short guy, little guy complex, went to work every night, put on his black leather gloves. And his intent was to go out and see how many people he could bust for a DUI and how many fights he could start to beat people up. And he made no bones about it. They tried to put me on patrol with him one time. And I said, absolutely not. And they said, why? And I said, because the first time he goes to beat somebody up for no reason whatsoever, I'm going to stick my gun to his head and it's going to stop right then and there. So we never wound up together or on calls together or anything after that. But that was the beginning of some real systemic problems that I seen, that the more the problems came up, the more conflict there was, the more I tried to fit in, the more I tried to go at the flow, and the more stress it caused me knowing how wrong a lot of these things were, the more I used. That was my only coping skill at the time. And there really weren't any resources. You know, you could go to what was called ADAP then, Alcohol and Drug Addiction Program, and go to that. That meant an Article 15 reduction in grade, a loss of 1 month's pay. And basically because you had to admit that you had a drug problem. So that followed right along with it. And then you went and you could come back and, you know, regain your status, your rank and everything like that. So there really wasn't a whole lot offered there for that. And I don't want to say that's where issues of PTSD started for me, but it definitely threw fuel to the fire of it. And the cognitive dissonance that I experienced at that point in time. So I did my time in the military. I got out. The oil field had kind of started to recover at that point in time. And I gave it one last shot and realized I can't do this. I can't continue to travel all the time, have a family and all of that. I need to change my life. I can get into college. I'm going to go. I'll start out junior college. Can't be that hard. And in the true form of an addict, I enrolled, I signed up, I got a waiver and took 21 credit hours per semester. The idea I had right away was I'll take the hardest class out of that 21, drop it, and I'm still at 18 and I'll keep on going and I'll graduate on time, maybe even a little bit ahead of time. Over the summer, instead of taking the summer off, yeah, let's pull another 15 credit hours over the summer. These are short classes. They only last 3 weeks. I go to the class half the day and I'm done. I can pull 2 of those at a time. Yeah, thinking like a good addict there. Let's just dive into this head first and not leave room for anything else in life. And looking back, didn't realize how much of that was not only based on an addictive behavior and an addictive personality and a drive and wanting to get it done and being, one of those super functional addicts that succeeds in stuff, even though they're only operating at 50 or 75%, I was running. It was an escape. I was running and escaping from life. I dove everything headfirst into that, got into sobriety, and quit smoking, quit drinking, quit doing drugs, quit doing everything all at once. Boom, and did this. And it was pretty traumatic for me. Through this being very, very functional, I made it all the way through that, got out of college, started a very successful business. And it was actually a courier business, but even during that courier business, I was still doing advocacy work. I was working with the state on civil rights issues. I did a lot of undercover investigations for fair housing, brought lawsuits against landlords here in the Montana area that were discriminating, set on boards for that. Well, I ran a business. Let's not forget that I'm going to be a really good obsessive functional addict here and just change my addictions while I go along. And that's kind of how I rolled with that. Being a courier business with a staff of 6 people working for me, and anything anywhere in Billings, Montana in 90 minutes or less, I lived my life with a stopwatch hanging from the rearview mirror. And one day I kind of woke up and said, enough's enough. And I sold the business, took my watch off my wrist, got rid of the stopwatch, and I spent 2 years in Utah living out of a backpack. My kids are fairly grown and they were with their mom at that point in time. We traded them back and forth. And I did not carry a watch. And I said, I need to get back to my roots, get back to what's real, and put on a backpack and lived 8 days at a time in the Utah wilderness and desert, and 6 days off. I just kind of traveled, and I still stayed in the mountains. So I went around the country and went camping in different places and things like that. And I'd show back up for work, and was down in Duchesne, Utah. And then I was over out of Lehi, Utah in the Sheeprock Mountains. And I spent 2 years doing that. And it was my 2 years of just kind of going, I'm out here walking aimlessly in the wilderness and trying to find my direction. If that sounds familiar to anybody, wandering aimlessly through life is exactly what I did. And no sense of time, no watches, no calendar dates, nothing. Sleeping, living, being with these kids that desperately needed help and a path and someone to share experience, someone to tell them it's going to be okay, someone to confront them, someone to support them, someone to build them up. And the beauty about that is the staff that we worked with, we did that for each other at the same time. And I came out of that, and this is, back to, being the successful addict, even though I wasn't using. And I spent about 20 years on a dry drunk, is really what I say. And not that I was that dysfunctional or anything. It was just, I was so focused that I couldn't live my life or work on myself. My marriage failed through all of that. Wound up back in my hometown area, and up there I was working for a Thunder Child Treatment Center writing grants. And then I got asked by the Department of Family Services in Sheridan to work with some of their families in their home, and families that were at risk of losing their kids. And so I took a few small contracts doing that. All of a sudden that exploded underneath me, and it turned into having one of the largest mental health centers in the area. The very first one that was a for-profit corporation that could bill Medicaid as a CMHC, as a community mental health center. There was a huge battle with the state over that. The state had been sued in 2002, and in federal court agreed to abide by the Social Security laws and say, yeah, we'll provide freedom of choice of providers for the people that were on Medicaid. And prior to that, all they had was the state-funded community mental health centers for like 40 years, and there was no freedom of choice, so they had to let us have a contract so that there could be freedom of choice, and built this great big organization out of it. In the middle of that, I got married again. My second ex now owns that organization. That's my revenge. It's a ball and chain that she's got that I don't want anymore. I learned a lot from that and moved beyond it. But when I built that program, and it was another one where when we split up, I had 5 businesses running at once. I had a sawmill that I owned. I had a record label that I owned. We were putting on festivals, doing benefit concerts, supporting the community with those, building up artists and everything like that. I helped my 2 sons start a martial arts school, and I built a coffee shop. So this is all while owning this mental health center. Steve's back there laughing. Yeah, doesn't that sound like a great addict, Steve? Isn't that a total addiction right there? That is success in your addiction, even though you're not using. Wow. Then all of that stopped very abruptly in literally one day. And I went from all of that to having nothing but the clothes on my back. And I had to spend some time reflecting and sorting out where I was at. And then I had to spend some time asking the question, why is it all these years I can't go to sleep at night? Why is it that I obsess over things all the time? Why do I have these swings of anxiety back down to, I never really got that much in depression, but there was anxiety back to normal, anxiety back to what I perceived as normal. And I really didn't like the anxiety times at all. It was racing thoughts, mind going a million miles an hour, everything, all that going on. And I had an osteopath for a doctor, and I'm sitting talking to her about this. And I'm getting ready to go through treatments for hepatitis C that I caught clear back in the 80s. Thank God I quit using and lived a very healthy life because it didn't destroy my liver. I didn't get treated till 2016. And I'm talking to her about it. And finally, she says something to me that a lot of my friends in the professional field have said, Roy, when are you going to do something about your PTSD? Whoa, this person doesn't even know me. And it's that obvious. I didn't know I had it. I did not know. I knew everything about it. I'd read the PTSD handbook that was put out by the VA back in the early 90s. I researched it. I used all the techniques out of that for experiential therapy, working with my clients that were sexual abuse victims and trauma victims, everything. And nobody ever held up the mirror to me like my general practicing physician did that day. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just went, whoa, it's that obvious? And she's like, yeah, it's that obvious. Do you want anything for it? What do you want to do about it? And I'm like, no, I don't want anything for it. I tried a couple of the meds that they gave me to help sleep at night, and I took them. Yeah, I went to sleep. I didn't dream, no REM sleep. I woke up the next morning. I felt like I'd been on the worst drunk I'd been on in my life. After about 3 days of that, I said, no. She's like, oh, give it time. You'll adjust to it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to adjust this. I want normalcy. I want normal. I'm going to do this without it. And I had to go back to what I'd been telling my clients for 20 years, especially bipolar clients and clients that were dealing with schizophrenia and, major issues. And I had to take my own advice. And for me, that advice was find some people that are close to you that you can trust. And if it's family members, wife, or something like that, it's not about finding them that you can trust. It's about trusting them. I educated them on what was going on for me. It was very open and honest with them, and started saying, I'm going to react to some things inappropriately. I'm going to have anxiety. I may get depressed or sad over it, and help point it out. And all you got to do is just say, Roy, you're not reacting to me. You're reacting to the past. Or Roy, your PTSD is kicking in. And having them tell me that, Roy, that response, I understand you're angry, I understand why, but it's not me, it's the past, it's what happened. And trusting them enough that when they said that I could step back and go, damn, you're right. what was just said to me and what just happened, I don't need to react this way. I'm reacting to what happened 30 years ago. I'm reacting to what happened when I was 17. You know, I'm reacting to that now based on, in my logical mind. I mean, I got a trigger right now that's making me remember that. And I think about one of the first things I learned that really clicked with me in psychology was state-dependent memory. And I learned at first about taking tests. What kind of state of mind are you in when you're taking tests? Try to be in that same state of mind when you learn the material, when you're getting ready to prepare for it. Be in that same state when you take the test. You'll do better and you'll remember it better. I was experiencing that. A song would come on, a smell, things like that, and all of a sudden these emotions would hit. And I would remember like I was there yesterday. You know, to this day, I go driving down the road and I smell the hay fields and harvesting and whatnot. The first flash I get in the memory is driving my grandfather's 1947 Ford truck down to Ucross, Wyoming from Buffalo to go get parts for my Chevelle with my cousin, and smelling that wheat field, smelling the creek and the river and the sounds that I'm hearing and everything. And all of a sudden, all them emotions are back. And I had to start realizing when people were pointing this out to me that the same thing was happening with those triggers that were creating anxiety, that were, you know, would trigger, and I would just blurt something out, or I would get upset, or I would start processing in my brain when I didn't need to. And I really, you know, I want to say today is my success in that I don't have to let those things control me anymore. They're not even so much of an issue. And today, Steve asked Chevelle, Steve, the side story, I got to share the story about this. My very first car I ever bought, and everybody told me, why'd you buy that piece of junk? You paid too much money. It was a 1972 Chevelle SS with the 402. I paid $175 for it. And everybody said you paid too much money. I finally found one for sale in 2005. $58,000 it sold for. There were only 1,500 of them made. Yeah. Yeah, Steve, I was one of those guys. But you know, I'm to the point now to where I notice I'll start to feel something after somebody says something to me or something happens and go, yeah, this is inappropriate, Roy. You're not reacting to this based on now. You're reacting to this based on earlier. And I can pause that. I can stop it. For me, getting through this was doing exactly what I had shared with my clients that would help them, and tried to work with the families to get them help doing. I had to do that same thing. And in the end of that, you know, Steve's reminding me we only have a few minutes left here. In the end of that, this is where I kind of hit my success point on it. And that today, my success, how I measure it. And I measure my success today by how much I have to give and how much I give. How much I have to give isn't as important as how much I give. And to be able to give, I've got to keep myself at 100% if I want to give 100%. And mostly I'm giving 110%. So I've got to be at 100%. And for everything, and this is one core principle I built all my business on, and even today in working with people, my core principle is I know for every single one thing I give away, 10 things come back. It comes back tenfold. It may be one thing 10 times as big, or it may be me giving to someone and then somebody else gives to that person. It could be any number of ways that I choose to see it, acknowledge it, look at it, and view it. And so the ability today to give with just what little bit I have, which the only thing I really have that I can give is myself. And being able to give of myself, that is the last part of that title of this. That is success for me, is to continue giving that away. Whether I give it away, somebody comes to me and asks me for ceremony and I take the time to find the ceremony. If someone comes and asks me if I'll, you know, do their marriage and marry them, I will give that. And I'll give, you know, some good sound counseling to help along with it, whether, whatever it is that someone truly needs, I will go out of my way to help them and give to that. And that's, for me, that's success. That's me being very, very selfish, because every time I get to give, it feels good to me knowing that I helped someone else and I gave. And in some ways that's kind of selfish, for me. That's a little bit selfish. But I just my gut just told me today, Roy, just share your story. There may be some pieces in there other people can relate to. There may be some pieces in there that someone can latch onto and helping a client. There could be a lot of things. I do want to put it out there, and I'm not going to talk and type at the same time. So Steve, if you could type this phone number in the chat box for everybody, I would sure appreciate it. It's 1-800-273-8255 and press option 1. That's the Veteran Crisis Line nationwide. Anybody can call that. It doesn't have to be the veteran that's looking for help. It can be a friend or family member, a coworker, an employer, anybody. There's also the chat. You can chat a request for help to 838-255. And that will get assistance. Did you catch both those, Steve? Awesome. That was what I wanted to close with that. And that goes back to my old days of AA. When anyone, anywhere reaches out for help, I want help to be there.
Yes.
And this is one way for it to be there. And so with that, we're right there towards that mark where I should probably shut up for a bit, answer questions, or let other people talk. And I hope everybody's received something out of this.
Roy, what was the chat, chat number again, the text?
838-255.
That's a text. Yeah.
Yes, that's a text. And I also want to let everybody know that there is a movement. We've got it in place here in Montana. It's moving nationwide. That is 211, calling 211. Check on your area and see if 211 is available. 211 will put people into contact with someone that can help and help that out. So that's another opportunity as well, is calling 211. And that's just like dialing 911, but it's for mental health. So there, some states have it, some don't. It is moving across the country as they get it implemented. Shirley says they have 211 in Alaska. I see Mike shaking his head on 211. Yeah, the 211 is a great resource as well, and they'll find the proper resource, whether it's food they need, shelter they need, mental health counseling, suicide, whatever, they can refer to that. So that's another one there. And with that, I don't think I have a whole lot. This is a different one and a challenging one for me. I love when I have a topic and I can go research it and come in as a subject matter expert and everything and spend a few hours on it. That's easy. This was a little more challenging, and this was just, I want to say what the grandfathers told me to do today. So thank you all for staying here, not signing off, listening to me ramble on. No.
Hey, Roy.
Yes.
It's interesting what when you're talking about the rehab programs in the military and how it was disciplinary, and when I was in, I came into the Navy in 91, and I went to a rehab program up at Great Lakes Naval Center in 2005. How that shifted. The paperwork that you get when you come out goes into the awards section of your record, so that whole shift of the process of getting help, rather than it being disciplinary, has shifted. Now, where the rub comes is getting those people that are involved in the command to see it that same way. It's the military. They still see it as, a lot of people still see it as disciplinary, and I've had some of the guys that I served with that are still in, when they come up against this issue, I get phone calls and they ask me all the time, I have this sailor that's going through this. And I was reminded, it can't be disciplinary. Otherwise, they're going to be reluctant to get help, and then when they come back, just reintegrate them back into the unit. It's not a punishment, it's, you got to approach it from a helping standpoint, and that helps people that were afraid to even ask for help, and a lot of guys came to me while I was still in the Navy that were afraid to go to rehab because they thought they were going to get in trouble. They thought it was disciplinary. And so I had to help dispel that dynamic that, no, if you need help, you need help, and if you realize that, then the command should be there for you to help you get that help, so yeah, it's just interesting how that shifted.
Yeah, it did a big shift, especially after Desert Storm and what happened there. There was a really big shift. And I think the other thing that's a challenge is what are the helping veterans with transferable skills when they come out? How do you transfer, in military terms, being a cannon cocker into a civilian job? What was your MOS? Artillery? We don't have much call for that in the civilian world.
Yeah.
But we do have a call for organizational structure and leadership. And we all know about that coming out of the military. There is a call for that. So, and I think that can be used to help elevate people when they come out of the military, even though they weren't in an MOS that directly relates to civilian life. They did learn a lot about organizational structure and leadership, I would hope. I mean, it's the whole military is based on that, good or bad leadership. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's there. And I mean, I can say my leadership was for the most part good while I was there. I can't really knock the leadership. It was a different system and a different time.
Yeah, and the VA has programs to help military members translate that language. I took a class at the VA when I first moved to Albuquerque, after I retired, and filling out resumes. It's like you say, how do you put your MOS on for us it's an NEC. How do I put that on a resume and have a civilian understand what it is that I do.
Yeah, it's kind of, and I bounce back to some of the people with workforce services around the country, our unemployment offices doing that. And it's kind of you kind of put together a line of creative BS that highlights the skills that you did learn that you can use, for lack of any better way to put it. But they are there and finding those. And I do think it's important, and I'm looking at what Shirley commented on over here. I really think it's important to really acknowledge these people coming back, not only as warriors and good people, but to acknowledge them for the things that they accomplished while they were there, and let them know that and how to do that. And the real challenge is what to do when you get back. If you come back and you're coming back to, like in our area, to the reservation, there aren't any jobs. There just really aren't that much for jobs there. That's really that's really hard. Maria asked, which are transferable skills? Now, can you put those in words to be understood? And then Mike had it, functional resume is handy. Yes, functional resume is essential. The transferable skills. So some of those transferable skills might be, listing the types of leadership skills that people learn while they're in the military. They do learn different leadership skills. Military is all about training. There's a lot of different training that goes on in a lot of different areas. So listing all those trainings, no matter how small they are, those are important. I mean, you may have went to, your local pastor may have put on a training and a talk in a subject. List that. You received training in it. the transferable skills. Let's say you are, the cannon cocker, artillery out there. You know what? There's a lot of mechanical maintenance in that. There's a lot involved in that with writing manuals and procedures that go along with what you're doing and understanding those technical manuals and procedures. So there's some technical writing skills and technical interpretation that goes along with that. Those are transferable skills. You really do have to think outside the box of what those things really mean when you're looking at what transferable skills are. You really have to for these people, because they learn so much. They learn so much. And how do you transfer those into civilian life as skills that people can work with? If let's say someone worked in the armory and they were an armor in the military, when they come back out, if they wanted to do retraining and they were really good at being an armor, I'd look at a machinist. It's the same thing. It's building, maintaining, and working with those small, intricate pieces, if that's something they really enjoy. Looking at it that way. It is a challenge, though. It is a challenge. I'm glad you asked that about the transferable skills. We're getting near the end. Any other thoughts, burning desires, insights, questions? I'll give it my best shot to answer. Hopefully I have the right answer or a answer. If not, we can go find it out there somewhere. Somebody will have an answer. Yeah, I forgot my disclaimer at the beginning of this. I reserve the right to be totally wrong at any given point in time. Please let me know if I am. Sometimes I'm going to be wrong on purpose, just to see if you're paying attention, thinking, or to get you to engage in dialogue and tell me how wrong I am. There, that's my disclaimer for life.
May I?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's really refreshing to me, coming from completely an outside world and working in a Native association to help people with, behavioral health and mental health. It's really unique. What I hear from you today is not a story I've ever heard since I've been in the United States for 10 years. So attending this meeting was uniquely important to me, seriously. Some of the processes, like how many natives have attended military compared to regular people, and why you even attend the military in the first place, and how the process went in, and how you acknowledge that they made a mistake by accepting you. I listened to it with fascination. My son was monkey wrenching here, so I tried to turn the video off to not distract people, but it is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. My question is, for someone like me, I have a native type background, because we both struggle with other people governing us in our land and telling us what to do. I'm full of that. Luckily, I learned from many leaders how to go above and beyond that to serve. But for someone like me who is just coming into a Native organization, trying to help the Native community, what are some of the skills you can advise me right now to help many like you who may not have taken advantage of some of the things you said? Like, not all of your brothers and sisters went to the military, and some of them are right now struggling with drug and substance abuse, and even my program is suicide prevention. How best can I approach this from a human perspective, from a uniquely crafted perspective?
I'm going
I'm
to step
sorry,
away
this
for
is too long.
just a second, and I'm going to get your answer. Is there anybody on the group today that's Apache or from that area of the country?
Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm actually from Alaska.
Carolyn, can you see it well enough to see what this is?
Not really, but it looks like a knife.
It's wood with a string on it.
Oh,
And-
that's from the crown dancers, the mountain spirit dancers. That comes from the holy one, the smallest
Okay.
of the crown dancers.
And when they spin this,
Mhm.
what's it for? You're going to help me answer Mohammed's question here, if that's okay, if you don't mind. What are they doing when they swing it?
They're it's kind of like a communication with our creator, our God, and it also helps carry prayers as it's being spun. So it's a call to the other spirits, the warriors, the holy people.
Okay. This one, the right to make this one is gifted to me by an Aboriginal from Australia, and they call it a bull roar.
I've heard that before.
And when they swing it, it's to communicate and talk to the grandfathers.
Right.
Now, you've got an isolated island halfway around the world doing the same thing for the same reason as the native indigenous people here. So Mohammed, I'm going to say two things to you with that. The indigenous beliefs, the core beliefs from your country and where you're at are not that different. There's similarities. The other thing I would say in helping answer your question is when you don't understand something, be upfront. I don't understand that. Please explain it to me and let the client explain it to you in their terms and have them educate you. As they educate you on that, they're going to be sorting it out for themselves. And then reflect back. What I hear you saying is, and keep asking that, what I hear you saying is, until you get it right, when you go through that process, that's a root cause analysis process of asking why. But about the fifth time that you ask why, and what I hear you saying is, you're going to get down to what they're really saying. They're going to educate you, and they're going to have a moment of aha, or they're going to have a door open that you can take them through for that aha moment, even though you've never been there. I've never stood in front of a bus and gotten run over, but I know it's a bad thing to do. You know, that's kind of like, you know, the PTSD and stuff. I have people, my son works for the VA. He's a therapist. He's never been in the military. He doesn't know the experience firsthand, but he knows he doesn't want to get shot at. He knows it would scare him a whole lot. Now he wants people to tell him what they experienced with that and share that experience and work through it. And he does really well with that. And that's what I've done, you know, with a variety of different clients. That's just a suggestion. I'm not giving advice. I don't ever give advice. I make suggestions. I do that because if I give you good advice and you don't take it, oh, shame on you for not taking it. If I give you bad advice and you take it and it doesn't work, shame on me for giving you bad advice. So it's just a suggestion. Do whatever with it. It's a lot safer as a suggestion, and take
I
that
really
for what it's
appreciate it.
worth. But yeah, thank you, Caroline, for helping out with that. Now you nailed it perfect because it literally is. There are some native indigenous things that worldwide there's some commonality because it is, you know, it's kind of like Taoism. There's the way.
Mhm.
I mean, there is just the way of things. You know, why are things the way? And it's okay that they are. There's an old parable that I just love about a Buddhist and a Taoist both standing on a bridge looking over the water, and a villager comes walking by and looks down the water and sees all these fish schooled together swimming upstream and says, why are they doing that? I always see them swimming like that together. And the Buddhist says, you know, because that's what they're supposed to be doing. That is the way. The Taoist says, because that's what they're doing right now. And it's okay. And you know, even if a client of mine is doing something negative, I acknowledge it. That's what you're doing right now. That's okay. How long do we want to keep doing this? So long answer to your question.
No, it's a perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, we have reached the end of our hour, and I want again to thank everyone for attending today. We have posted the survey link a couple of times, Natasha has, in the chat box. And I want to just really give a big thanks to Roy for spending this hour and really putting himself out there and sharing with us from his heart and his experience. So thank you, Roy. And looks like he's put his contact information there in the chat, and we will save this chat as well and make it available if anyone would like a copy of that. So great seeing everyone, some new faces, some old faces, and even in Ray's case, some older faces.
Thank you, everybody. This was an honor, and thank you for allowing me to share this story here. And for me, it's what I needed to be doing today. That's exactly it. It's what I needed to be doing today. So do what you're doing.
Thank you.
We'll broadcast again in a couple of weeks. We may have another guest speaker join us, or we'll hear from Ray Daw again and continue our dialogue. But on that note, I would like to turn the floor over to Ray Daw to finish us off in the right way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Roy, for a really heartfelt and strong talk with us, and opening our hearts to challenges we have our relatives.
We're having a hard time catching you, Ray.
Not be
Audio
allowed.
is a little choppy.
Everyone is here. Thank you very much. Navajo, my clans are Kialani, my father's clan are Tlazasana, and my
We're having a hard time hearing you, Ray. I'm sorry.
maternal grandfathers are Bitterwater people. Oh, my paternal grandfathers are Bitterwater people from, and I'm from Hawk, Arizona, which is South Navajo. But accidentally turned off my
Ray, we're having a hard time hearing.
yeah, been having internet problems here, and
Okay.
for some reason my
Well,
video went out too, but it's part of the process. Of I'll do the blessing. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm doing the blessing, but and I hotel lesti the Nado Nasini Quikudo, but you Kayada hotel kudo sleep. I asked the creators to bless us today as we heard Roy's teachings and his heartfelt word, put his words into our hearts, into our minds, to carry us through the week and through our lives as we are here for our people. So thank you very much, Roy, and all of you. You all take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you.
Again, everyone, stay safe. stay connected and stay healthy. We'll see you again November 20th, I think, is our next broadcast date. So look for the announcement. And until then, be well.
Did you get my audio?
I didn't hear that, Ray.
I finished my the blessing for us, and hope all of you have a good weeks.
Thank you, Ray.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Roy.
That
Take care of
was-
yourself. We'll
Can you hear me?
I feel a little drained and a little lighter at the same time right now.
Mhm.
that's a good thing.
That
Well,
was good.
let's talk next week sometime. Maybe we get Ray and Dave and Sean on, and we'll see if we want to try something. Have your son come on.
Okay, yeah. And I'll chat with him a little more about it. If you want to set a time, and we can get him on the conversation as well, and he can tell us what his presentations are kind of like. I can do it